Now let's think for a minute right here. Would Khaula, who's trying to help the Prophet, recommend a 6-year-old child to manage the household of a 50-year-old Prophet? Really? But according to the record, she already accepted Islam in 610. How could she accept Islam in 610 when she wasn't even born? The canonization of Aisha's age has been used to justify child marriage for centuries. You're listening to Wise Women with Daisy Khan, where faith rolls up its sleeves as a force for good and where women define the future with wisdom and wonder. I'm Daisy Khan. Kindly subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Welcome back to Wise Women. Today we're going to talk about something that has been used for centuries by critics of Islam and tragically by some Muslims themselves to justify one of the most harmful practices in the world, child marriage. The controversy surrounding Aisha's age at the time of her marriage to the Prophet has become a weapon, a tool to discredit Islam, and an excuse to harm young girls. And it's really become a stumbling block for many non-Muslims who want to be allies of Muslims in this fight against bigotry. So, what if the story that you've heard isn't the complete story? So, what if I showed you the historical, scholarly, and even mathematical evidence that points to the exact opposite conclusion that Aisha was not a child, she was a woman? So today I want to talk to you through what I found when I was doing scholarly research for my 30 Rights of Muslim Women book. So let's begin. First, we will discuss why the Prophet even married Aisha and what was the context of that. You see, the Prophet was married for 25 years to Khadija. It was a monogamous marriage. And they were very much in love. They were partners in their marriage. And after she died, the Prophet was truly devastated. In fact, the year after her death was called the year of mourning. He found himself to be a single father of 4 daughters, managing not only a household, but carrying the weight of the divine mission that he had been given by God. So he needed to care for his home, support his daughters, and he needed somebody to share with the struggles. But he was too committed to Khadija and wouldn't even consider another marriage. And this is the context of how Aisha got married to the Prophet. This is when a female companion named Khaula bint Hakim stepped in because she saw the Prophet's distress and suggested that he remarry. Why don't you marry somebody who can take care of your home, who can be there to comfort you, and who can take care of your children? And the Prophet didn't want to marry anybody because he was still in love with Khadija, and we know their love story. And so he asked, who? Who are you suggesting? So she said 2 women. First was Saud, a 65-year-old widow whose husband had been martyred in the battle. And the other one was Aisha, the daughter of his closest companion, Abu Bakr. Now let's think for a minute right here. Would Khaula, who's trying to help the Prophet, recommend a 6-year-old child to manage the household of a 50-year-old Prophet? Really? Think about it. Could a 6-year-old care for his daughters, 20-year-old Zainab, 19-year-old Ruqayya, 17-year-old Kulthum, and 4-year-old Fatima, and provide them with the support that they needed? No, of course not. That's absurd. So this is why the Prophet immediately approved to send the proposals to both women, because he knew Aisha's age. He knew that she was already a young woman, that she was not a child. She was, after all, the daughter of his best friend, Abu Bakr. Of course, Sauda immediately accepted the proposal, and the Prophet married her because he needed somebody in the home. But the proposal for Aisha hit a wall because, you see, Aisha was already betrothed to another man, which again suggests that she was not a child, that she was already of marriage age. But her engagement was broken on the grounds that Aisha was a Muslim, because the family didn't want to give their son to Prophet Muhammad because they hated him, because he was on a mission declaring the one God. Now that the engagement was broken, Abu Bakr was free to look at the proposal that the Prophet had sent. Now, he began to think about what it would be like to create a familial bond between the two of them, but he was hesitant that marrying his daughter to his best friend would somehow create an incestuous relationship, or at least that's how he perceived it, because they were so close. The Prophet reassured him. He said, "You are my brother in Islam. You are not my blood brother." And so the engagement took place in 620, when Aisha was 16 years old. The marriage took place after the Hijrah to Medina in 622, when Aisha was 18 years old. And here is something that no one will tell you that truly characterizes the Prophet. Both Abu Bakr and Umar, who were Prophet's closest companions, wanted to honor him by marrying his daughter. And so in 622, 623, shortly after the Hijrah, they proposed to marry Fatima. According to Sunan and Sunan Ibn Majah, the prophets rejected both proposals. And he simply said, she is too young. He was citing her immaturity and her inability to manage marital responsibilities because of her youth. So if the Prophet refused to marry his own daughter as a minor, would he then marry someone else's daughter as a child? It's inconceivable, because he was a very honorable man. So this context alone, the grief, the need for a mature wife and a stepmother, and Aisha's engagement to another man, the rejection of the minor daughter, should make us question and reject this narrative that we've been handed over the years. So, but that's not enough. We have to explore, go a little bit deeper into this. Let's look at the source of the narrative itself. Where does this narrative come from? So there is a hadith that is attributed to Aisha that says that she was 6 or 9 years old at the time of her marriage. It is found in the collection of Sahih Bukhari. And it's a long hadith. I'm not going to read it, but I just want to let you know that it does exist. But here is a practical fact that changes everything. A scholar did an analysis on Aisha's age, and she argues that the report about Aisha's age is not a true hadith, meaning it's not a saying of the Prophet. The Prophet didn't say it, but rather it's a khabar, a piece of news or a report, which has no legal or theological authority. In other words, it's not the sunnah of the Prophet. The Prophet didn't do it. The Prophet didn't say it. The Prophet didn't instruct it. So she also points out that this khabar was transmitted primarily in Iraq, not even in Medina, and contradicts every other historical source we have from that period. And some scholars have gone further and concluded that the hadith was likely fabricated because of political reasons. So the question is, if the people who lived with Aisha in Medina never mentioned her being a child bride, and the story only surfaced years later in Iraq, a distant city, how reliable can it be? So let's take a few minutes to look at the timeline. The timeline is complex. I'm going to throw up some screenshots here for you to just follow the timeline, so stay with me. So let's really begin from the first revelation, which occurred in 610 CE. The Prophet publicly started preaching at 613. His beloved wife Khadija passed away in 619. He migrated from Medina in 622. And it was in 622 that he married Aisha. If Aisha was 6 at her engagement and 9 at her marriage, that would place her birth at 613, the year that the Prophet began publicly preaching. But here's the problem. Several early historians, including Ibn Ishaq and Ibn Hashim, prominent scholars of the time, both of whom wrote their accounts before this hadith was recorded by Bukhari years later, state that Aisha accepted Islam in 610. The same year the Prophet received his revelation. So think about it. If Aisha was 6 at her engagement, that would place her birth at 613. But according to the record, she already accepted Islam in 610. How could she accept Islam in 610 when she wasn't even born? So Dr. Salah ad-Din al-Idlibi, a respected Syrian hadith scholar who has done a deep dive on Aisha's marriage age, concluded that Aisha was born in 606, 4 years before the first revelation, and that would make her 16 or 17 at the time of her marriage, not 9. Now, let's take a few seconds here. Since we talked about how this hadith surfaced not in Medina, but actually in Iraq years later, let's look at how this hadith was narrated. The primary narrator of this hadith was a man named Hisham ibn Urwa. He spent most of his life in Medina when he was known as a respected scholar. But late in life, he moved to Iraq at the age of 71. And two scholars, Ibn Hajar and al-Dahabi, noted that his memory had started to fail him there. Now, it's not uncommon for 71 or 70-year-olds to start experiencing dementia. And ironically, two of his students from Medina, Imam Malik and Imam Hanifa, do not cite this hadith at all in any of their books. So we have a hadith that was only narrated in one place at a time when the main narrator's memory was failing, and it contradicts the mountain of historical evidence that we have. So that alone should make us pause. But let us look at some more evidence and some contradictions. Asma was Aisha's older sister. There is evidence that Asma was 10 years older than Aisha. Historical records tell us that Asma was 27 years old at the time of the Hijrah in 622. That means Aisha would have had to be 17 or 18, not 9. Another evidence, there was the Battle of Badr and Battle of Uhud. And a lot of women were joining in the battles. They were fighting on the battles, helping with the medical tents, and others were helping carry pails of water. And it is recorded that Aisha also participated in the Battle of Badr in 624 and the Battle of Uhud in 625. And if she were 9 in 622, she would have been 12 or 11 during these battles. But the Prophet had explicitly forbade anyone under the age of 15 from participating in warfare. And he did enforce that law. So would he have allowed his own wife to join a battle if she was 11 years old? No, not at all. Then historical records describe Aisha at Uhud wearing robes and bangles, carrying water skins full of water, and even treating the wounded. She is described as a woman, not as a child, because no child can carry big water skins. Another point. There's an age difference between Aisha and Fatima. Fatima, by all records, state that was younger than Aisha. If Aisha had been born in 613, as a 9-year-old narrative suggests, then she would have been younger than Fatima. So clearly you can see there's a mountain of evidence that suggests that Aisha was not 6 years old or 9 years old. Okay? So why does all this matter today? Because the belief that Aisha was a child bride has been used for centuries to justify the marriage of prepubescent girls. In Yemen, Afghanistan, parts of Africa, forced into marriage because religious leaders point to Aisha's age as justification, saying, oh, if the Prophet married a 9-year-old, so can we. Now we know that the Prophet did not marry a 9-year-old. So today's scholars who are showing evidence that Aisha was between 17 and some even say 27 at the time of her marriage are not engaging in historical revisionism. They are doing what scholars have always done, following the evidence where it leads. Dr. Al-Idlibi concluded that because there's only Aisha's word for it and no other evidence to back up her statement, and because all other evidence points to her being close to 18, the hadith must be rejected in favor of historical evidence. But friends, this is not just an academic issue. The canonization of Aisha's age has been used to justify child marriage for centuries. So refuting this falsehood is a step toward protecting young girls around the world. I hope I've helped you see this story in a new light. To me, the evidence is clear. Aisha was not a child when she married the Prophet. I'm not asking you to change your beliefs today. I'm only asking you to question what you have been told. From the evidence that I've provided you, all the sources are mentioned in my book, so feel free to get my book, 30 Rights of Muslim Women, to see for yourself. And finally, if this episode made you think, share it with someone else, and definitely do subscribe and leave a comment so that I know that what I'm presenting to you is being heard and listened to. I appreciate you being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for joining me on Wise Women. If something stirred in you today, don't let it stop here. Share this episode with someone who needs it. Reflect on what resonated for you, and definitely plant one seed of change, however small. Remember, you do matter, and your actions have a ripple effect. But none of us can rise alone. To explore more resources and ways to get involved, do visit my website, daisycon.com. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave a review, because every click is your way of amplifying this message to others. Wisdom isn't just heard, my friends, it's lived. So let's live it. Until next time, stay wise and stay rooted.